Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to chat about some of my top palettes for spring. I am very excited for the change in seasons, and although you can wear whatever eyeshadow colours you want all year round, I find that I tend to gravitate towards more lighter pastel colours and just lighter colourful looks in general. So I've put together a list of some of the palettes that I find really encompass this. Alright, let's jump into it. So the first palette that I initially thought of pretty immediately was the Museebeauty Impressionism palette. Also, these palettes are in no particular order. I also mentioned this in my favourite palettes for 2020. This palette has a really wonderful array of colours, and I just find that the combination of them all is just so inspiring. There's a really wonderful range of tones in here as well. So you do have more brighter, colourful shades like this red over here and this really vibrant green down here, but you do have some paler options as well, like Parasol and Dancers. So this isn't a pastel palette by any means, but there are some lighter colourful shades in here, and I just think that these greens, blues and orangey pinks are just so spring-like. You know, spring's all about flowers blooming, and when I think about the kinds of colours you might see maybe in a field, these colours are it. This palette actually has a bit more range in depth, I would say, compared to the other palettes that I'm going to be mentioning, in that you can sort of deepen up your looks a bit with this brown up here. The other palettes that I'm mentioning are more on the paler pastel side. So whilst this isn't a pastel palette, I think that the combinations of colours are really suitable for springtime and really pretty. The formula is of course fantastic as well. Mattes are pigmented, easy to blend. The shimmers are very nice as well, very smooth, more sort of standard shimmers I'd say. They're not super reflective, but still very smooth and pretty looking on the eye, with the exception of Wisp. Wisp is a more punchy shimmer compared to the others, and it's really pretty. This palette is what I'm wearing on my eyes today. I've got Dancers, this gorgeous orange on the outer half of my eye, and then I've got Parasol, beautiful green colour. I don't think I have another green like this in my collection, in the inner half of my crease. And then on the lid I've got this beautiful orangey shimmer Sunrise packed all over my lid, and then with Wisp layered a bit in the inner corners on top of Sunrise as well. I do also have another shimmer that is layered a tiny bit on top of the lid, but that's in another palette that I'll be mentioning later. So yes, this is predominantly what I'm wearing on my eyes today, and I don't know, it's just a really fun palette, and if you're interested in these kinds of tones, I would heavily recommend it for spring. Alright, let's jump into another one. So next up, let's go into the other palette that I'm wearing on my eyes, and that is the Mini Tasty Peach palette from iHeartRevolution. Adorable packaging. I love that it's 3D peach at the top, and it's like soft touch. This palette has a really wonderful, warm, sort of peachy, almost coral colour scheme. Really, really beautiful, but obviously more sort of one-dimensional than the previous palette that I mentioned, in that the tones you're getting in here are predominantly of the same colour family. So sort of peachy, orangey, coral shades, with the exception of these two shimmers here. You've got a more sort of bronzy copper shimmer and then a gold shimmer as well. So you do have two shimmers of a different tone, but predominantly with the mattes that you've got, you're going to get a similar toned look. It's a mini palette with a concise colour scheme, so I think if you're looking for these kinds of tones, you'd really enjoy it. This palette doesn't have a whole load of depth, in that a lot of the mattes are sort of mid-toned range really, but I think the looks that you can get with this are really pretty, and if like me in the springtime you're not doing very dark deep looks, then this level of depth will probably be fine for you. I do have a testing video with this palette, so if you do want to see a demo and a more sort of in-depth look at it, then you can visit that. But overall, I just think the colours are really pretty. These peachy coral tones I think are perfect for spring, and this palette is quite nice to work with quality wise as well. The mattes are quite pigmented, and they do have a bit more kick up. They're a bit more powdery than some other formulas that I'm going to be mentioning. The shimmers, on the other hand, are unbelievably stunning. They are very reflective, foiled, sparkly looking. They sort of look like they're glimmering on your eyes, and I am wearing one of these on my eyes today. I've got this sort of light pink shimmer just dabbed in the center of my lid, slightly over that sunrise shade from the Impressionism palette. I added that just because I wanted a little bit more oomph, because the Impressionism palette shimmers are, as I mentioned, more sort of standard, pretty softer shimmers, whereas these shimmers have a bit more dazzle to them, and I think you can tell that just from looking in the pan. Very, very reflective looking. The only sort of thing that I would mention that is not so great with this is that I found that these shimmers do crease slightly faster on me than other shimmer formulas, which is odd because these aren't creamy powder formulas. Usually it's the creamier shimmer formulas that tend to crease faster on me, so that is a little bit sad, but they look so beautiful in the eyes anyway that whatever, I just wear them anyway. But yeah, these shimmers do have a slightly more flaky formula, so I would definitely recommend applying them with your fingers. But yeah, I've made some really pretty looks with this, and I am looking forward to bringing it out more in spring. Next up we have the Colourpop and Sailor Moon collaboration palette, and this is called the Pretty Guardian palette. Can I first of all just highlight how beautiful this packaging is? It shifts. I don't know what you call this feature, but yeah, it's one of those ones that like shifts to a different picture depending on the angle that you're holding it at. It's also corrugated, is that the word for it? Little ASMR section. Yes, you can scratch it, it's got like corrugated lines on it. But this palette is super beautiful, and definitely one that I immediately thought of with spring as well. They definitely did a fantastic job with the Sailor Moon collaboration, and these colours I think are just, again, really wonderful for spring. So this palette is on the lighter side. You're not going to get a lot of depth with these tones. There isn't a deeper matte actually at all, really. You just have the beige toned mattes and the colourful mattes over here. I think the combination with the yellow, the pink and the purple are just really pretty colours for spring. The shadows themselves perform really well. The mattes are quite pigmented, especially these bolder colours here, and they blend out really easily as well, just as per the usual lovely Colourpop formula. There is a nice range of textures, I would say, in this palette as well. So you do have just the standard complete matte shades, but you do also have the mattes with the little specks of glitter or shimmer throughout them. I think there are 4 of them in this palette. Yeah, there's this one, this one, this one and this one. I know some people aren't a fan of this formula from Colourpop, but I think it's nice. I mean, you do have like normal mattes as well without the specks in them, but I think they just add a little something extra. The other textures that you have in this palette are lovely shimmers as well, especially these ones and this purple. They look so iridescent on the lid, and I think that sort of shine is really beautiful, especially for a spring look. Soft but beautiful. But then there is also this pressed glitter as well. Just to mention, I know some people don't like pressed glitters, and there is actually one Super Shock shadow in this palette as well, this shimmer shade here, so it's like slightly squidgy, and I do really enjoy the Super Shock formula as well. So yeah, overall a really wonderful combination of colours in here, vibrant but soft at the same time, which I think is very fitting for spring. Right, next up we have the Futurism 6 Lunar Lavender palette from Kaleidos. I recently did a video reviewing Kaleidos as a brand and a number of products that I got from them, so if you want to see like an in-depth review of this, you can head to that. This is a 6-pan curated colour scheme of lavender tones. So if you like purple tones, then this is definitely a perfect spring palette. I like that with this palette you can go really light with just using this paler lavender shade. You can go a bit more darker or more colourful with the deeper lavender, and then you can add extra depth with these browns as well. The shimmers are also, of course, so beautiful. Kaleidos shimmers are a standout formula, very sparkly, shimmery, but these two also have a sheerer base, which I think looks really beautiful for a more sort of subtle layered look on top of other shadows for spring. And they are, of course, duochrome shades as well. This one, Moon Roof, shifts from purple to blue, and then this one, I can't remember what it's called, shifts from sort of like silvery to pink. Really beautiful shimmers, and the mattes are nicely pigmented and blend nicely as well, although this darker shade does take a bit more time to blend out than the other mattes. All in all, wonderful purple palette for spring, if that's what you're into. Okay, we're on to the last two palettes, which are both from Makeup Obsession. So first up, I want to mention this little guy, the Keep It Fresh palette, which has a wonderful minty colour scheme. Again, a curated monochromatic palette. I think minty tones are just perfect for spring. There's just something about the colour that makes me think of blooming and life again. It's just a really pretty colour, especially on brown eyes. I find that it really brings out the brown in my eyes, and it is very flattering. I will say that this formula isn't my absolute favourite out of all the others that I've mentioned. It's not like a top formula in my collection, but I think for the price, I think this is £5, I believe. The formula is quite decent for the price. And the reason why I'm recommending this is because if you want to try minty tones, but you don't want to pay more for a more expensive palette, or you're not sure how they're going to look on you, or you don't reach for them very often, so you only want like a small inexpensive palette, then I think this is a really good option. You only get one matte in this palette, which is this sort of deeper teal shade here, which is very pigmented surprisingly and blends out really nicely, so no problems there. So other than that one matte, the rest of the palette is a mixture of shimmers and some more sort of satin, less impactful shimmers, I guess. So you do have a range of finishes there. I personally prefer more reflective, more punchy shimmers, but I think with a spring look especially, if you want like a softer look, a nice satin or less reflective shimmer can look really nice as well. The only shade that I would say I'm not that big of a fan of is this fresh faced sort of white shimmer in the middle. This one is a bit chunky and not that great to pick up with on a finger or on a brush, so this is the only one that I really don't like out of all of them. But for £5, the colour scheme that you get and the way the rest of the shades perform, I think that this is a fantastic option for someone wanting to dabble in mint shadows for spring. And then last but not least is the other palette from Makeup Obsession I have, which is the Crystal Waves palette. Beautiful colour scheme. It sort of makes me think of summer as well and the beach. But yes, this palette is, if I can open it, a beautiful array of colours. This one has the pastel tones that I love to use for spring. The Crystal Waves palette I love for the pastel options, and then also the more vibrant colourful options as well. So I think this palette really functions quite well for spring and summer. It's not a rainbow palette, but I think you do get a really nice range of colours in here, and I just think the colour scheme is so pleasing to look at and inspires me, especially for spring. So as I said, I do mainly reach for these pastel shades in the springtime. I will say that the formula isn't absolutely amazing. It's not my favourite, but I do think that it functions well enough for the price. So this, I believe, is £10. I actually won this palette in a giveaway, same as the Keep It Fresh one, the mint one that I mentioned before. In terms of like worth, I would say that for £10 this is pretty decent. The pastel shades do require a bit of building. It helps if you of course do apply them on top of maybe like a white base to make the pastel shades stand out even more. But yes, you will need to layer them, but I don't think that that is too unexpected because pastel shadows are less saturated in nature, right? These pastels do layer quite well, but I would say with this palette to be a little careful with how much you layer on, because they are a little bit dusty, and if you layer too much it can get a little bit chalky or sort of dust away when you try and blend it. So layer just enough to get the shades to show up, but don't go too ham on it, otherwise you'll have a difficult time working with them. So yes, the pastel shades do require a little more finessing to make it look nice, but I have gotten some really pretty looks with them, so I'm happy overall with it. The shimmers I also really enjoy in this palette as well. Really beautiful range. Some of these shimmers are sort of more sheer topper shades as opposed to being standalone, you know, really pigmented shimmers. These three and also this one as well. The more sort of impactful ones are, I guess, So Wavy and Glisten. These two are really metallic and reflective looking, gorgeous. You do also get two sort of more duochrome shades, which I think is really pretty for that iridescent look. Opal looks white in the pan, but it does reflect a really gorgeous sort of pink. And then Calm down here is this really interesting sort of lilac blue toned shade. And that's it. Those are my top palettes for spring. I hope you have enjoyed listening to me talk about them. I hope that just gives you some inspiration. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment and subscribe if you want to. I will see you in my next video. Bye.